Hello everyone, I'm Carly, and if you notice that the title of this episode sounds like an innuendo, you would be correct. And welcome to Read Receipts. It's that time of year again, your skin is sweating, your heart is racing, your toes are curling, because it is the summer of love. Ooh! I knew you missed it. So, I originally had planned a very different looking summer of love, something that looked a little similar to last year, plus some things. We're changing that. Look, everyone knows that I love Big Brother. I kind of should have assumed that I wasn't going to have enough time for exactly everything that I had originally planned. But there was one thing that I've wanted to do for the last few months. And so we are kind of scrapping what we have done in the past. We are not going to do any book club episodes, as you might have noticed, because we've gone a little over a month now since the last one. So don't worry about that. Drop that from the TBR for now. And we're going to do something different this year. So instead, this year, we're bringing back the off-the-shelf episodes, and we are starting a summer-long series. Never mind the fact that June is already past us. We are starting a series where we're going to be talking about one of the most talked about things in the romance genre, in books, but especially the romance genre, sex. The inspiration for this actually started because I have gotten really into Smosh this year, and I was listening to Smosh Read's Reddit stories, and Shane, thanks Shane, mentioned this non-fiction psychology book called Come As You Are, The Surprising New Science That Will Change Your Sex Life by Emily Nagoski. And so just based on the couple of sentences that he gave talking about this book, I immediately was really interested in it. A little unknown fact about me, in college, I actually had to do a project where we had to run a campaign for kind of like a particular, not exactly political issue, but kind of something like that. And our group did sex education. And so ironically, this is something that's a little baked into my past that I have a slight passion for. I do think that the resurgence of books has had a positive impact on sex, but there's just still so much nuance to sex that I think that people could really compare themselves to what they might read in a story and feel like, well, I don't exactly fit into what this person's describing. I've never experienced this way, blah, blah, blah. It's still just something that even if you happen to read a lot of romance and so therefore you kind of see sex on the page quite a bit and you might feel as though you have an idea of what normally happens in the bedroom, the fact of the matter is there's still a lot that could be different for a lot of people. And so this series can help with kind of breaking down that thought process and giving you a little bit more exposure into what sex might look like for you and what pleasure might look like for you. Even with my background of feeling more comfortable in my sexuality, this book still felt revolutionary to me. Nagoski goes into details about why some of us feel more or less interested in sex than others and ways to improve your sex life and much, much more. And truly, what she talked about felt so important to me that it gave me the idea to do this miniseries. I will say, if this is a topic that you really, really want to hone in on in your own personal life, I highly, highly recommend buying this book, reading this book, listening to this book, however you need to consume it. I really think that you should. The benefit of getting a more physical copy is that it does come with a few worksheets to help sort of work through your own personal experiences and guide you through some stuff in a more therapeutic way. So that's something to consider. And because I think that this book is worth every penny, I am going to try and balance a little bit of giving you guys the information that I think is important to know from this book, while also kind of trying to still give a little bit of respect in terms of Nagoski's efforts in pulling all of this together. I don't want to just completely regurgitate what she wrote and then make it feel a little bit pointless to read her book, because this woman deserves everything. She deserves to roll in a pile of coins like Scrooge McDuck for her contributions to science. I will say also that while a lot of this book is a little bit more focused on women's sexuality, I do think there is still a lot to be taken from anyone, whether you were born a woman, identify as a woman now, if you've never been a woman in any capacity. I think that anyone could really take something from this series, both for yourself and also potentially for your partner if you say aren't a woman but are in a relationship with a woman. So if you aren't a woman or don't identify with being a woman, Wow, how did you get here? But regardless, this series is still very much for you. I will say also one other thing that I really like about this series, or rather, one thing that I really like about this book too, is that a lot of this is all coming from the perspective of how to improve women's sexuality or sexual experiences. But I still feel like there's so much, because she is a sex therapist, Emily Nagoski, that there's a lot to take away from it that doesn't pertain to sex at all. I think that truly, like, again, like I said, you don't have to be a woman to necessarily take something from the series, and you also don't need to necessarily improve something in your sex life to still take something from the series. I do think that even if you got something from the series that wasn't sex related, it probably will kind of in a trickle down way affect your sex life positively, hopefully. But I just think that there's still so much to get from this book and this series. So this series will be broken up into 5 parts. I originally was going to do 4 because that's kind of how the book is broken down. But because this intro is probably already getting a little long, and just with some of the other stuff I wanted to cover, we're going to do 5. For the first part, this episode, we are going to be talking about obviously what you can expect from the rest of the series, but also kind of basic anatomy. And when I say basic anatomy, I don't necessarily mean I expect all of you to already know this. This is more of just like the general information that's kind of been out there that I would assume that if you were in a decent sex education class in today's day and age, that you might learn these things. And that's me assuming as a 30-something-year-old person that doesn't actually know what's going on out there. Then in episode 2, we're going to be talking about the not so basic basics that are talking about these elements of our sexual selves that are not as commonly known, but that Emily outlines in her book. Then in episode 3, we're going to be talking about sex in context, which looks at how the outside world affects our sexuality. In episode 4, we are going to be talking about sex in action, which is talking about the act of sex, desire, and our body's responses to inputs. Not those inputs. And lastly, in episode 5, we will have ecstasy for everybody. Here we will round out the series talking about orgasm and sex positivity. So, to cap all of this off, if you're still not sure how you feel about this series and are asking yourself, should I continue further? Why should you listen to this series? Similarly to what I said before, I believe there is something new to learn from the series no matter your background and experiences. Whether you are a person who finds the topic of sex contentious or a little intimidating, or if you are just a person struggling on this planet, as we all are. I think there is valuable information in this book for you. You might take away something from this book that has nothing to do with sex, or at least is not going to be applied to your life in a way that directly is impacting it. Because Emily is a sex therapist highlighted word in that, there are going to be coping mechanisms and therapy tactics that, while in this book are intended for you to ultimately get more comfortable with your sexuality, you know, there's a wide variety of ways that you can apply it to your life. Personally, for me, some of the things that I found the most interesting about this book had more to do with understanding my own brain. But if you are, of course, a person who is wanting more out of your sexual experiences, you are in the right place. I think the reason why so many of us love romance books is because we love to feel that beautiful, happily ever after feeling that comes at the end of these books. And I think that sex deserves to be a part of that. Because while romance books have helped open the door to exploring sex and relationships in this new light, this series and book can help you get a little bit closer to feeling as though you yourself have reached that happily ever after feeling. Because we are all deserve it and are capable of it. So, let's get started. To begin, one important point that Emily, I'm hoping that I can call you Emily because I'm going to be talking about you a lot, and Emily is just a few. Actually, is that the same amount of syllables as Nagoski? Emily Nagoski. Well, shit. I'm just going to call you Emily because that's your first name. Emily reiterates throughout this book, but especially in this first part when we are introducing the anatomy, that we are all made up of the same parts, just organized in a unique way that over the course of our lives may kind of change. The real underlying message of this is to say that we are all normal no matter what. Even if you feel as though there is something a little bit iffy about you, you still have all the same parts and all the correct parts. They just might not look the same as everyone else. Throughout this book, this can refer to like our mental spaces too, but in this chapter, we're going to be talking about this very literally when it comes to our sexual organs. And also just a disclaimer, I am going to be referring to male and female bodies in reference to the genitalia of those groups as assigned at birth. Just to be clear, I will be talking a little bit about intersex people also, but that is kind of the framework that we are going to work with throughout this. If you know me, I'm a visual person, but obviously due to the nature of the internet, it's a little bit hard to pull up like a good picture that we could use to maybe map out some of the things that we're going to be talking about. However, I came up with a solution that I think is going to work for us. I gotta be honest, I was very proud of this when I came up with this. I just happened to like, obviously minus the scarf because that would be kind of crazy. I just happened to like get out of the shower and I didn't want to put on a robe exactly, but I don't know if I had access to my robe. So I put this on instead and I was like, you know, good timing. So anyway, like I said, as a little precursor to this whole conversation, Emily stated that all of us are made of the same parts, just organized different ways. And so in the specific context of our genitals, that is kind of literal. Male and female bodies kind of have the same parts, they just look a little bit different. So for female bodies, we have the clitoris, which is where the blood flows during sexual arousal. In the diagram of my outfit, that would be this guy. So imagine, okay. Imagine this is the clitoris. This is, I guess, the vagina opening. My face, maybe my mouth. I feel like my mouth should be the urethra because it's kind of the hole inside the hole. We can pretend that my face is a hole and then we don't have to get that specific. So in our case, that is the clitoris, but for a male body, that would be the penis. Then we have the labia majora, which is like the soft, stretchy skin, might be a little hairy, outer area of the vulva. In the case of my outfit, that is this scarf, which does happen to be pink. I'm not sure if it serves much purpose other than it just kind of being on our bodies, but the male body equivalent of this is actually the scrotum, which, gotta be honest, didn't love learning that. I would prefer that I didn't have any equivalent to the scrotum, but it is what it is. So this guy, you know what? Maybe this should have been on the inside. If you know what I'm talking about, you know that this maybe looks a little bit more like the menorah. Wait, is it called the menorah? That can't be right. God. Female bodies also feature the ovaries, and that is where the baby making eggs are. I don't really have a good, because those are internal, so you guys can't really see that. Not that you can see my boobs, but you can in theory pretend that they are my boobs. Maybe more like my shoulders. Yeah, we'll go with shoulders. That's a little better. And so obviously the male equivalent of this body part would be the testes, the balls. The balls, scrotum is ball sack, testes are balls. That's like a very quick overview. Labia, is it menorah? I don't remember if it's menorah or not, but you can kind of pretend that this is the smaller lips is this guy. We all kind of come in different shapes and sizes. Like in theory, your clitoris could be like the size of like, I don't even know, super small, or it could be kind of decently big. I think that Emily refers to like a larger one to be like a gherkin, and usually it's also kind of hooded, which is why we got this guy here. It might be a little bit more covered for some people. It might be a little less covered for some people. There's a lot of different variations, basically, of this situation that you might have. But for the most part, you'll have all the same parts. They just might, again, be composed in a little different way. I do want to go back, though, and reiterate the fact that the penis and the clitoris are effectively the same organ. Because, of course, for women, we have been told for a lot of our lives, or at least the narrative that we probably have experienced, is that we should be able to experience an orgasm through penetrative intercourse. Which, if you now know which organs are which, that makes no sense. Like, if that is the expectation, is that the clitoris and the penis are the same thing, why is it that in so many sex positions, the clitoris is likely going completely untouched unless someone is making a very specific effort? No wonder so many women feel as though sex isn't really what they thought it would be as it is popularized in our culture, because it's not for us, it's for male bodies. So if you are one of 70% of women who doesn't experience an orgasm through vaginal stimulation, Yeah, of course you're not gonna do that. Basically, you're not crazy if you don't really enjoy sex, at least as depicted in our culture. And in case you're wondering, by that definition, having a vaginal orgasm in the case of a woman's body would be the equivalent of a man having an orgasm through prostate stimulation, aka maybe getting pegged. So, if for some reason your man still would give you grief about maybe not enjoying sex and just kind of dealing with it the way that it is, one, dump him. Two, ask him if he'd be okay with getting pegged. Why not? That was a joke, but why not? So, like we already said, even though on average the clitoris is a lot smaller than the penis, it has like double the nerve endings. It can come in a variety of sizes. As we discussed, you could have like a little itty bitty pea, you could have a pickle. To each their own, but it's probably going to be equated to a food either way. You might be surprised to know, though, that the external part that we see of the clitoris is, again, just the tip. It actually extends a lot further into our bodies. It continues deeply into like the rest of the vulva, kind of all the way down the vaginal opening on the inside. There's also a point, I'm reading this off directly because it's kind of crazy. Emily mentions that men have a Y spot where the foreskin attaches to the shaft, and that the female bodied equivalent is called the fourchette, and it's the curve of the tissue on the lower edge of the vagina. And she says that this is a highly sensitive and undervalued piece of real estate on all bodies. And for that, I would like to know, Emily, why is it then in your little diagrams in this book, if you're going to point out that it's such a undervalued piece of real estate, would you not have like 15 arrows pointing at it to say, by the way, this is about where it is? Because I just think if it's so undervalued and if you're going to highlight it, give us a little help. As we've all noticed, pictures are really helpful. Like, I'm guessing that like it's around here, but like, I just like some specifics. Emily recommends the spot. Hopefully you can figure out where it is exactly yourself, because I just needed a little bit more specifics on that. Emily does make a point of saying that you should try to find your own clitoris, and I completely agree. It does feel a little bit silly of a thing to say if you are someone who is, again, a little bit more comfortable in your body, but there are plenty of people who are like so scared of their own bodies that they genuinely don't know. They don't try to look, or maybe they just don't look very often. And that is completely okay. Where in that category of things you might fall. But if you don't know, get naked from the waist down, at least. Take out a mirror, start looking around, start poking around. Again, use this visualization if you need to help you find it. It is the most sensitive part of our bodies and the most capable of eliciting pleasure. And so for that reason, you should get to know where it is. Again, if this is something that like feels a little weird for you, don't judge yourself. Don't be ashamed. It's totally okay. But I 100% recommend go find her. Go find your girl. Moving on to a much lesser talked about part of our vulva, we have the lips. Inner and outer, bigger and smaller. Even though the inner lips are called the labia, it is minora. I got it right. Even though the inner lips are called the labia minora and therefore it's kind of implied that it's smaller, that is not always the case in a body. As I kind of referenced earlier, maybe the scarf should have been on the inside and then it could have been a little more poking out. For some people, that might be what your vagina looks like. I don't know. Not to mention, on top of that, they might appear in a variety of colors. It might not all look the same kind of flesh skin tone that the rest of you might look like. They might be a little darker. They might be a little lighter. And the reason why it's important to bring this up is because odds are, if you have seen a vulva on TV, if you have seen it in porn, whatever, odds are you have seen like a very tucked in version of a vulva. It normally looks not like there's a whole lot going on. You might even be like, bro, I couldn't point out any of the body parts that we're talking about on that thing. Where is it? And to be honest, I don't know exactly what the reason for that messaging is, but basically it feels completely normal and valid that you might have taken away from that. Therefore, your vulva looks weird because that is the version that you're seeing everywhere else. It's a little bit more publicly shown. And it's like, oh God, I look nothing like that. So don't beat yourself up if that is not what you look like, because that is not what most people look like. I wanted to make a point of saying that because odds are you have not seen a version of your own vulva out in whatever media that you might see it in. Again, don't be ashamed. Don't judge yourself. You have all the right parts. We all have the right parts. They just might be organized in a different way from what you have seen, but that doesn't mean that you are any less normal than anyone else. Now, we're going to talk about a part of the body that you might have heard about, honestly, more than any of these other parts, and that is the hymen. As you might have noticed, I have not pointed out the hymen in this description of the visual that I have created, and that is because it is so pointless. I mean, in short, just like every other part of the body, it varies greatly. Apparently, some people might have a hymen that covers their entire vaginal opening, and some might have hardly nothing at all. In fact, some people are born without them. They tend to change over time in general with age, but usually by your mid-20s, they are noticeably less prominent. Your hymen won't break and it won't stay permanently torn, just like any other part of your body. If anything like that were to happen, it would heal. Basically, what I'm trying to say is anything that you've likely heard about the hymen is probably untrue. It is such a useless piece of our bodies. It's kind of just one of those things that evolutionary we have no need for, but also it's just there and it's not gonna probably go away because it's not really interfering with anything. So it's just whatever. You shouldn't be judged on it. If anyone's judging you on your stupid little hymen, if you even can find it on your body, personally, I'm not sure mine's down there. I might not have one. We might as well be judging men for their useless ass nipples, which, I mean, to be honest, sometimes I do. But that's more of a joke because I think we should be making fun of men more, to be honest. That, in my opinion, kind of covers all of the body parts that I think we needed to shed a little bit more light on. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to leave them in any comments. Or again, if you want to grab this book, you might have a little bit more answers in here if there's anything that you feel didn't get hit on enough. I did want to quickly bring up intersex people just because usually they're not brought up at all. Intersex refers to people whose genitals don't fit in the box of what is decided as male and female. But as, again, Emily states, and we're going to say it one more time, we have all the same parts, they're just organized in different ways. Intersex people do not need to be fixed. There's nothing wrong with your genitals just because it doesn't fit into these boxes. Odds are you still have all of the right parts, they just are organized in a different way. I don't know about the rest of the world, but I know in the US there has been a long-standing issue with medical professionals feeling as though they need to fix intersex people so that way they fit in one of these two boxes. But oftentimes when this is done, it causes more problems on the person because now their body is fighting against what it was naturally born as. It's really just not a good practice. I say this just kind of spread the awareness of it because people might not realize that. If for whatever reason, say you become a parent and have an intersex child, I hope that you know that if doctors begin recommending procedures for your child just because they're intersex, it is likely not necessary. The only cases in which it might be necessary is if for whatever reason the way their body parts are organized could result in them getting an infection or something like that, which that in itself is pretty low. But if it's not doing something like that, that is a little more justifiable to their well-being, there is no need to alter anything further. I actually follow a woman on TikTok who is intersex and does a lot of intersex advocacy. Her name is Jackie Blankenship. So if anyone is a little more curious to learn about the intersex experience, which granted it's a vast experience, there's so many different types of intersex people. In fact, I've even seen something recently about how PCOS people / PMOS people might actually be intersex. Not really something that's being diagnosed by any sort of medical field, but it's just technically it fits into the description of intersex, which is really interesting to consider, especially as someone with PMOS. Just all that to say, if you're a little more curious about it, I highly recommend her. She, I think, has a podcast. She has social media where she talks all about it. So feel free to look her up. And that is it for now. That was our first episode. I hope that it was a little enlightening. I hope you guys stick around for the rest of the series. Have a sexy summer of love. All of the content that you hear in this podcast is curated, recorded, and edited by me truly, with special thanks to the authors of the books that we cover, Emily Nagoski and Pixabay for the music that we play. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you'd like to listen, and for more of our content in between shows, you can find us at The Read Receipts Pod on Instagram and TikTok. We read all your comments and love all your likes, so please, please, please follow along. Until our next show,